Okay, welcome back to the Teach for Justice podcast. I am very, very grateful and humbled to have Stacy Young and Virginia Nguyen from Educate to Empower here. And the main reason we are here today is to discuss a really impactful event. It was impactful to me, even though I wasn't there the entire time, that recently happened. And I wanted to not just debrief it, but celebrate it and really kind of take a second to acknowledge all of the wonderful things that happened as a result of the event, and maybe get a little bit of background on the process, which I'm also fascinated by. And it was a conference that you guys put on called Teaching for Justice, and it took place at UC Irvine this year, 2022, on April 29th and 30th. The first day, Friday, was all virtual. I attended that day, especially that opening keynote panel, which was I have definitely some reactions to. And Saturday was full day in person. The list of speakers, if you're not familiar with the variety and the dynamic group of people talking about the Asian American community there, the speakers might not mean much, but I'll link you to the list. But let's just say, and you guys can talk more about their qualifications. It was authors, journalists, people who are archivists. I mean, it was politicians. I mean, activists, people who just do amazing work, as well as frontline educators, students. I mean, it really was such a great representation. But to get a little context for everybody, let's just kind of start with the inspiration behind something like this. I've seen sort of cultural webinars, but this was so much more. What was the inspiration behind doing something like this?
You know, this really started out as just kind of a dream and a conversation. And this really came out of, I think when we looked back on our records, a conversation we had in March or April 2021. This was at the peak of, well, maybe not peak, but this was at when most of now the media was recognizing anti-Asian hate and the rise of it, following the murder of the 6 Asian women in Atlanta. So, you know, in a lot of conversations that we were having with fellow educators, with our community, a lot of us were just wondering, what can we do? We were invited to speak at the Irvine City Town Hall community conversation about addressing the rise in anti-Asian hate. And in that conversation, this topic came up again, what can we do? And then that conversation segued into we need to educate folks. Like, we can't, this is happening because people don't know the history of anti-Asian hate. This is happening because Asians continue to feel invisible. They're not represented. Students don't have positive representations of Asians in the media, in curriculum, anywhere. So we were identifying this is the problem. And so Virginia and I started thinking, like, okay, what can we do as educators? Okay, well, let's just start with educating our networks. So we started, the two of us, with local organizations like Orange County Q, UC Irvine, in creating workshops to help educators learn the history of anti-Asian hate, but also with resources in how to bring Asian American studies into the curriculum, or at least start highlighting achievements and celebrating Asian Americans. And then, you know, one thing leads to another. And with our work in many different communities at UC Irvine, especially, we started getting connected with different folks from different departments. Some notable people at the very beginning of this conference planning is Dr. Stephanie Reyes-Tuccio. She is the Vice Chancellor of the UCI Center for Educational Partnerships. I need to check on that title, but okay. She is part of the UCI Center for Educational Partnerships. Dr. Thuy-Vo Dang, she is the archivist at the Southeast Asian Archives in the UCI Libraries. Dr. Nicole Gilbertson, who is the director of the UCI Teacher Academy. And so, it's really their belief in our vision that really kind of spearheaded that inspiration behind this conference. And it was very grassroots. It was just us dreaming out loud in a Zoom meeting with a running Google Doc of what could this be? What would we want this to be? And as we began looping in more and more folks from different organizations so that everyone's kind of lending their networks, their skills, that's how this came to be. It was a dream of how can we connect communities? How can we advocate for Asian American studies? Bridging these communities from higher education, academia, scholars, classroom teachers, K-12 classroom teachers, to students, to parents, families, other community organizations, because this is our common goal. And so that's how we saw this. How can we bring all these communities together with this common goal? How can we center this? And what are the types of workshops and experiences and opportunities we can provide for all these stakeholders so that they're actionable steps of what all of us can do?
So the vision is clear now. Was it always this clear, or did you map it out first, or did you just say, here's what we want to do, let's just kind of start and figure it out as we go?
Well, Virginia's a big dreamer. So she
Okay.
just right out the door, let's do a conference. And then all of us were like, okay, but how? And so it did take, this was a year of planning of the logistics of how we're going to do this, where are we going to do this, and what capacity, also being very aware of, the heavy burden that teachers were carrying this year and being
Oh, yeah.
mindful of not adding to that and wanting to just be supportive of that. And wanting to invite community members to the space. So there was a lot of intention behind it, but Virginia dreamt big. She wanted a conference, and we got a conference, and we just kind of kept it, iterating on how many sessions, how many workshops, what is reasonable, what will teachers want, what types of workshops and experiences can we offer and bring that's meaningful, that will inspire, that is useful, that teachers can feel like I can do something with this, or if not a teacher, someone attending me, like, okay, I can do something with this knowledge.
Yeah, and I hear you as, a frontline teacher here. We weren't, this year especially, I wasn't reaching out for any and all professional development. This was not the year for that, right? But I was very attracted to what you guys had put together, and was able to go the first day. But yeah, I appreciate, on behalf of everyone who was there, or everyone who gets hit up by people, because I sent it to my whole staff and invited people that I wouldn't have done that without it feeling like it was going to be worth your time. So the process, I'm a big fan of asking people about their process. Was it a smooth process? Were there times where it was really tricky, or maybe even looked like it didn't happen, or was everyone just so genuinely helpful and excited that it kind of went pretty good?
Hey everyone, this is Virginia, aka the Dreamer. First of all, Alfredo, thanks so much for having Stacy and I. We're huge fans of your work too, and huge fans of your podcast title. So, I think when you ask about the process, I think this will really resonate with other educators that, like, it was what I declare as like heart work. It came from what our core beliefs, hopes, and dreams were, which was a place that was affirming, a place of celebration, a place of joy, and a place of community. And those were our driving goals, our guiding lights in terms of the type of experience we wanted. And so when you ask, was it a smooth process? I would say yes, because we were all driven towards something that would become, that was good. So in those ways, it was smooth because it was like easy to find the time and the energy to do something you care about. There were challenges because this is the first conference that I've helped be a part of. Stacy has thrown other conferences. She, helped create IUSD, where I teach, one of the first conferences that brought speakers from out of the district in. So Stacy has had this experience. She's helped organize OCQ, she's helped organize CCSS. So like Stacy has a lot of conference experience, planning experience already. So thank goodness for her, because I may be the dreamer, but when it comes to logistical things, I'm still learning.
Right.
So in terms of smooth process, like as a person this was my first conference to try to help organize, I would argue that it was smooth, and the committee that came together to make this happen, actually, like that was something that upon reflection, so many of us talked about, was what a great experience it was, not just to have the 2-day conference, but the whole year together felt amazing. And it was because we all came together with those visions of community, right? The vision of joy, celebration, knowledge. I learned as much from the community of planners and committee as much as I did in the workshops that I also attended.
Right. So you're trying to provide professional development, but you're getting it through the process in ways you didn't even know was going to happen. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Who else needs a shout out for putting this deal together?
Honestly, so many. If it's possible, if you can link our conference website
100%.
to the page where you host this podcast, because it truly was this convergence of organizations, so many. And like Virginia says, like in reflection, like I am so grateful to have been a part of that, just to be in that space of community leaders, and all of us, this was voluntary. We all met bi-weekly. All of us, we carved out time to do this. We all had our own tasks that we did on our own time, in addition to whatever other jobs, and lives that we had, because this was a passion project for all of us. So truly, there were so many organizations and folks involved in that whole planning committee, that really made this special.
In our world, there are, big names, right? In education and in whether it's activism or whatever it might be. Is there somebody who at the beginning you thought wasn't gettable, but then you guys got them to participate and you guys were like, I can't believe we got this person?
Oh yeah. That would definitely be Lisa Ling.
Okay. Which was awesome. I saw that. It was awesome.
Oh my gosh. Can I just call her Lisa? No.
Sure, yeah,
No, I'm kidding. So Lisa Ling, when we were at the part where we were like, okay, who would we like to our keynote speakers to be? And I had just saw that Lisa Ling had addressed Congress about the need for Asian Americans represented in the curriculum. And so we were just talking, and at first we were like thinking of like local leaders, and we were really excited about the local leaders that we were going to ask if they would keynote for us. And then I think this is me being a dreamer. I was like, does anyone here know Lisa Ling? Just kind of putting it out there. And then in our conference committee, a few folks were like, I have a connection. And it turns out Dr. Tuivo Dang, who is an amazing person and so humble, did not share with us that she actually was recording an episode for Takeout with Lisa Ling, and that they had shared space, broke bread, or I guess in this case, spring rolls together. Yeah. And that's how she knows her. And then, so she's like, I think I know how to reach her. And so she reached out to her, and Lisa Ling said she would, and she was really trying her best to come in person. That was the part that was really amazing, is that, she was doing her best to come. She wanted to be in the space with educators. Her scheduling didn't work out. So she filmed that recording, but I don't know, what did you think of the recording?
Oh, first of all, I didn't even know it was a recording. I thought it was live. I don't know if I missed something there, but I thought it was live. I was feeling it live. But I agree, though, that reporters are educators. They are explaining to people. It's a lot of crossover skills. I feel like I would have been an investigative reporter if I didn't go into teaching or a journalist. But yes, I've interviewed some journalists for this, and I have some more lined up because I feel like, it's not just us in the classroom educating kids, it's parents and it's the news. And some people are doing it well and some people aren't. She's doing a great job. And so I was already signed up when I saw that she was going to be there, and it was just like bonus. And then other names were coming up because you had been adding, and it was just like, this is going to be, it was, as an attendee, it was already building up to be bigger than I thought it was going to be. I was down for what I signed up for, and it was very powerful. And maybe it was the setup prior to her presentation, because the setup too was just very palpable. Just kind of the vibe was so good. So if people had been there for the opening group conversation and then saw her, like, we were already ready, and it was awesome that way.
Thanks for bringing that up, because we're very proud of the community of speakers and workshop hosts that we basically curated. These are community members that Stacy and I and those on our committee learn from. This is not just about what can we teach, it's about what can we learn. As we think about this conference, something that I continue to remind myself and say, it's becoming kind of like a mantra of mine, is that, to combat hate, I choose knowledge and love. Yeah. And that's what we were doing. We were choosing those in our Asian American community to share their stories so that we could both gain knowledge and also at the same time really, what is it that we do as teachers? We have hope. We have hope in our students. We bring our heart to the classrooms. We are really working to address and relive and give students the experiences of school that we really loved and enjoyed. And then we're also trying to address and fix and eliminate those experiences at school that did not feel good for us. And so all of that came into this dream of who it was that would come and be a part of this conference and what we could provide participants. But we also wanted the workshop hosts and the speakers and the those that were coming, they were part of that community. We wanted everyone to leave feeling that we were together in this act of knowledge and love.
Well, I'll tell you, I think one of my takeaways, and I don't know if this was intentional, but it sounds like it was also this message. As adults, you were saying, I would have loved school more if these couple of things would have happened, and the main thing been included more, or it just affirmed or acknowledged. That came out, and the degree to which you all and me too. I went to a private Catholic high school that was predominantly white and did not feel seen, right? To the extent to which that didn't happen for many of the speakers, became vividly clear. And it was, the message for us educators who were there was please do not let this cycle continue. Let me start with my first impressions. I've been waiting to share this with you guys because I was taking, notes, and my notes ended up being more about how I felt about being there than it was early on, especially. First and foremost, I want to react as a virtual conference attendee who is not Asian. I could feel the pride coming through my computer screen on that early opening roundtable. It was not only palpable, but there was a genuine love and excitement coming through the screen. While I sensed the joy in being together, it was mixed though with a little bit of tension in that first one I felt. And I'm not sure if it was just day one tension that was in part due to the recent AAPI violence, or just some kind of doubt about like, we're going to get very real here in a second, and kind of a here we go kind of thing. But regardless of what it was, that those mixed feelings, it was incredibly compelling. I guess what I'm saying is that I could tell from the jump that this was not going to be this like surface level performative set of presentations. Did either of you have a similar feeling in those first moments, or did you get similar feedback from any other attendees, or is it just me that was going through that?
Thank you for sharing these impressions, especially your feelings, because I think if anything, that is something that in my own reflection separates this conference from many other conferences that I've attended, and I've attended many, is that feeling that I got from this, and that energy, and from both the virtual and the in-person. And I can't let this escape me that this is probably the first time in my whole life, at least career, adult life, where this was an educational space where I am surrounded by Asian Americans, where Asian Americans led the sessions, where they shared their own stories, where they felt safe enough to share their own stories in a space that folks would understand, where the keynotes, the leaders, the speakers were Asian American. And for myself, as an Asian American woman, that was such a powerful moment for me to experience this, because I don't think I can ever experience this in any other space, education or not, where, this type of community, but also who's leading it, who's organizing it, who's behind this. And I think that plays a lot into the safety that folks felt in being vulnerable and sharing these stories. We started with that educator panel, and I was one that shared, like, I was one that wished I had this. I grew up in Southern California, never learning these things, not until college. How is it we still have students today asking for that 20 plus years later?
Right.
So I think, yes, I had the same feelings, and I'm glad that was an impression you took from it. And I think that tension was this feeling of many of us, for the first time, feeling safe enough to be vulnerable to tell my story fully, as raw as I can be, without needing to be careful about what I say. Because in some spaces, as the person of color, I feel like you do need to be careful of how much you open yourself up to and what you share. And I think this community allowed us to do that, which allowed people to really connect with us in many different levels, whether you identify as Asian or not. But, as educators, as parents, as siblings, and so I think that is a part of what made this really powerful.
Yeah, I feel like what I missed out on by being unable to attend in person the next day, even though I felt 100% sure of this, was that if I were to show up and I were to feel encouraged to share, that I would have been in a space that I could have shared, where that may not always be the case in my own department meetings of my own school, and so I felt that plenty of times. And it does remind me, you said early on that someone had dedicated, you brought up that someone had dedicated their learning that day to themselves as a child. And one of the things I think that really hit me, Virginia, was in that opening thing, you said that you did like an ugly cry right before it started. And I was thinking like, yeah, there's, this is, I don't, I'm feeling this is going to be awesome, but we need to acknowledge like whatever is going on. And as I felt included, I felt included, and it was just really powerful. So for you to get me there almost without anybody saying much at the beginning, I just think it was really, really amazing. And, some other people said some great stuff at that opening conversation. Nahi, the math teacher, said, I'm a math teacher, but I'll always be an Asian American student, which, just kind of reminded me how, we're all still, we're all still learning if we're doing this right. And one of the things I think we're learning that most of us are trying to learn is how to do this inclusively. right? And that's one of the things I was trying to pick up was, okay, I can be more inclusive. Even though I teach history and everyone thinks it's so easy, we can do better. And worst case, I can take some strategies back to some people that are resistant on that. Anyway, let's go ahead and I have three basic questions for you guys. One is to reflect on what were the highest of highs, and I know it's not like a competition or a ranking, but is there a high point that stood out for you guys? Was there a surprise, anything that surprised you from the event? And then finally, just any moment you wanted to sort of acknowledge as you're reflecting on it here. But let's start with the highs. Was there a high or two where you just felt like this is going like I wanted it to go, or better than I wanted it to go?
Hey everyone, it's Virginia again. And oh my God, it's so hard to choose a high because that conference, it was like, honestly, it was better than I could have imagined in terms of the energy we felt, like sharing space with all these educators that were there. As an Asian American woman, seeing folks that who are not Asian American there with us, I don't know how to put into words how that feels. How great it feels to be supported, to be valued. That one of the big challenges of being Asian American is this sense of being invisible. And just the presence of folks that are not Asian American, I mean, that makes me already feel not only visible, but valued. You're not only visible, but like worthy of your time, of your energy to learn about my experience. So that was really beautiful for me. So I want to definitely give a shout out to those that came, because I do know what it's like to enter a space when you are the minority, and that takes courage to be vulnerable like that. And so seeing that really was great for me because it just like filled my heart.
Go ahead.
So I think highs, there were several. The one that I keep telling folks is that at the end of our Zoom day, the question was, what's one word to describe how you feel? And over, we kept seeing the words seen. I'm actually reading the comments from the Zoom. I'm like, from the day, being a history teacher, I like document stuff, and
Right.
But I have someone wrote hungry, seen, excited, inspired, empowered, thrilled, encouraged, like seen. I kept seeing the word seen. And that's exactly why we created this conference, is because Asian American histories and lived experiences are not in our curriculum. I mean, they're required, they're in our standards in California, but they're actually like not present. Teachers don't have the tools to teach them. And here's a community of educators of Asian American and Pacific Islander educators who are saying, hey, today I felt seen. That to me was a huge high. And then the in-person day, to being an Asian American educator or just being an educator of color can be really lonely in our spaces. Last I saw was like 70% of educators are white. And so as a person of color, and then add to that as an Asian American person of color, as an Asian American, it's a lonely feeling. And then to be in space with educators who are mostly Asian and then who were mostly educators of color, that also just the physical community was another really exciting high for me.
Yeah, as before we get to Stacy, I also wrote down at one point you said, as a Vietnamese American, I think we all have a complicated relationship with America. In my U.S. history classes, I had that too, and to be witnessing an a Vietnamese person say that about America is so true, but so often goes unsaid. And I we have, I have a majority Vietnamese population that I teach, and we have teachers who really tiptoe or race through the Vietnam conflict because of how uncomfortable it is. And I decided, pandemic really focused me, I think, or certainly clarified things for me. I said, we're going to sit in this, even if it's uncomfortable. We're going to sit in this. We're going to, and that's where my desire to start looking at recording some oral histories, if there's a way I can do it and contribute to the bigger project, since I have that access. And we can talk about that later. But that was a really, as a history person, that was a really important thing I thought that needed to be said early, and I was so grateful that you had said that. Stacy, highs, and it's not, I know it's not a ranking thing or whatever, but a couple of big moments.
For me, I definitely took a more of a kind of backseat organizer role. I didn't present in this intentionally, just kind of running logistics on this one. So I think one of the most pleasant surprises for me was logging on that morning, that Friday, because as someone who has been presenting a lot in the last couple of years, most of it being virtual, hosting workshops, all of this, normally you get about, if you're lucky, 20% of those that registered show up. And that's the truth. And I get it. I do not, there's no shame on anyone. Like, I also have signed up for stuff that I just couldn't muster myself to do because of all the things. And we knew this. And so, like, I understood this. So that morning I was like, okay, let's see how many show up, because, we don't know, we don't know. And just seeing, like, I mean, I think we were at 190 at one point that Friday. I was blown away. And people stayed. That's the other thing with virtual things, that, like, as the day goes on, that number starts like dropping off.
Right.
But to see, like, we were holding strong, folks stayed. And every session was so full and people were so engaged that for someone, like, again, as an organizer in that back end, I was just like, I was filled with just so much pride, but also, like Virginia was saying, like, valued, that these people are here. They see value in this. It makes me feel valued that all this effort and time is shown through this attendance. And that goes for Saturday too, because I mean, you've gone to conferences, you know how it is. By that last session or that last keynote, you're like, oh, half everyone's gone.
Especially if it's after lunch.
But people stayed, and awesome. People were committed, people were participating. And I know we touched on this already, but to be in that physical space in the same room when a non-Asian person steps up to ask a really thought-provoking question or to affirm their allyship with you and what this workshop or keynote or whatever the topic may be, to sit there and to hear that, see that, it's so hard to describe that feeling, because in so many spaces, not many would do that, to stand up, present themselves as being not Asian, to speak up on behalf of their Asian colleagues or students or community. And so those were really pleasant surprises that I personally have not experienced very much. And to experience that was a high for me.
And we know the math, when you affect a teacher, you affect all their students. So there's a multiplier effect, and which, so if it might be 190, but for those that have, or high school for sure, it's the 150 kids they're going to go back to, and then they're 150 the next year, and that's got to be incredibly gratifying as well. And yeah, I think one of the things I think I missed on Saturday was that I would have felt very comfortable saying, okay, I've had these questions for years that I've been hesitant to ask anyone, or I didn't work with any Asian teachers, and so I just have to ask. And most of them probably would have been around. And Virginia, I know you held a a talk about teaching Vietnam in a history class, I would have been there with 20 questions about, is this off limits? Is this, how should we frame this? And is it okay to just talk about this? And that's the one I feel like I missed the most. But I just want to acknowledge that I felt like, had I been there, I know that I could have gotten through any hesitancy and said, here's my real questions, right? Strategies aside and content aside, here's my real questions. It would have been about the how kind of stuff. And so I'm jealous of the people that were there and have serious FOMO for missing. But
can I
yeah, sure.
follow up what you just said? I think what you are picking up on is what it means to create a safe space, right? Like, we're talking about a safe space that you felt virtually. And, as teachers who have taught through the start of the pandemic, we've had to pivot and recreate and imagine and care for our students. How do we do that? What did we learn from this conference? We learned that when you create spaces that are affirming, when you make visible people's identity, when you invite them to share their identities, you create safe spaces where participants, in our case, we're other educators, but imagine this is the classroom. You create spaces where students will feel able to and comfortable to ask their questions, to be their most true and authentic self, and most importantly, to explore the unknown, right? Like, you felt like you could ask us things you have kept to yourself if you were with us in person, and at any opportunity, even through Zoom. We did have questions coming through during all the workshops of teachers wanting to know more. This is, I mean, if we're going to talk about a high, that is the high. The high is a modeling of a space that feels safe and inviting for all. It was a conference it was spotlighting Asian American studies, but it wasn't only safe for Asian Americans. It was safe and inclusive for all. And that's what it is that we're really trying to do. Something I didn't get to say earlier is that the reason why it was spotlighting Asian American studies is because Stacy and I, and actually quite a few of the committee members, are of Asian American, we share Asian American identity and experiences. So we wanted to speak from our own experience and use that to teach. But what we're really doing is we're modeling what it would look like to really teach for justice. What would it look like to create an inclusive space? What does it look like when you come in trying to understand and learn, and listen to one another's stories, and then commit to bringing that into the classroom? I mean, that's what you felt. That's what we all felt. We felt the imagining and the actual manifestation of a space that we want in our own classrooms, a space that is safe and welcoming.
Yeah, I definitely got that. And of course, then thought, okay, how can I make my students feel this way too? That was really and strategies and content aside, how can I connect? And as a non-Asian who teaches in a predominantly Asian school, that was one of the things was, okay, I would like content and strategies, and those were definitely there, but how do I connect? That was really a major question, and how can I, so that I can then teach so that they'll trust me. That was a big part of it. Surprises. Were there any big surprises in either the process or the day, whether it was good or bad? You can pick, but did you have any major surprises go on?
I can see Stacy thinking, so I'll share.
That's okay if you did.
Yeah, no, I think honestly, the biggest surprise was just how well it went. For me, that was, I said it earlier, it was better than I could have imagined. And we debriefed as a committee, and it was our committee was high on life. We were so excited about it. And then another like surprise was we did ask the participants to fill out a survey and give us feedback. All good teachers do that, right? We reflect, think about ways we can improve it. And we did that, and we got some great insights. And the feedback was just so positive. Over 90% of the participants that filled out the survey said that they would come back and that they would invite their colleagues. That is talk about surprise, talk about affirmation, that the space that Stacy and I and other educators had imagined we needed was what we needed. So that was the surprise, because we had never been in a space like that, so we dreamt it, we tried to make it happen, and then it was affirmed.
All right, Stacy, do you have one, or you could use a pass, I think, if you want.
I feel like I addressed this a little bit with my highs. It was like a high/surprise, but not to put a downer on things at all, because this is, very positive, but a not as positive surprise for me was the lack of participation and attendance from more local districts that I thought would have sent a lot more teachers, educators.
It's fair, including mine, like I said, I put it out to the staff. Yeah.
I was surprised in not a good way as I was looking at attendance roll in, to be really frank and honest, because I'm not originally from Orange County, but I've chosen to live here, and I've spent now 20+ years in Orange County, and I'm very aware of the Asian communities, especially surrounding UC Irvine, where we're hosting this, and even for the virtual day, but regardless, and the lack of attendance from some local districts was a little bit surprising for me, and a little disappointing, when I know that there are students in these communities that need this, they want this, there's activism requesting this, and I just feel like this was a missed opportunity to serve these students and meet these students. So that was a disappointing surprise. A positive surprise was how news of our conference spread, and we did have quite large attendees from places outside of Orange County. So I was like, wow, that's amazing you heard about this and that you're coming full force. There is this one district where they sent probably 20 educators, including district office representatives. So I think there was an assistant superintendent in attendance, a director of curriculum, and they attended with their teachers, which for myself, this is unheard of. Shout out to Walnut Valley, by the way.
Okay.
And so that to me was a pleasant surprise. So I had my own personal disappointment of some districts that I was like, I really think you missed out. Like, this was a missed opportunity on your part to serve your teachers and your community. But on the other hand, we have some other districts that showed up, were committed, attended. To me, that is a model when you have district office folks who are in charge of curriculum attending this with their teachers, so that they have this perspective of how to support their teachers and students and community. But you know what? There's always next year, and there'll always be future ones.
I can confirm that it was a huge missed opportunity. I can definitely confirm that. And all right, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about moving forward here. What advice would you give to a non-Asian educator like myself who teaches in a predominantly Asian population in front of them? What would be like one or two things like this is critical if you're teaching this group?
Well, the way that you speak about your students, Alfredo, I already get a sense of your classroom and all your efforts to be inclusive. So I would, I think it applies not just to Asian American students, right? Asian American and Pacific Islander students, but it applies to all of our students. Make sure that you are giving your students representation in the curriculum, right? Like, and do not only focus on sad things, like make sure that you are providing a lot of moments of celebration of their identity. You know, the Vietnamese American presentation that I did, workshop that I did, it was the Vietnamese American, or the Vietnam War from the Vietnamese American perspective. And basically our takeaway was, one, don't introduce Vietnamese Americans only during the time you teach the Vietnam War, right? Vietnamese Americans are much more complex than that moment in history. We have culture, we have we have family gatherings, we have like food to celebrate, we have songs and music and all the things that make us a community and that are rich, that also connect to the curriculum, the K-12 curriculum, in a lot of ways. Please do not introduce our community in the context of only the Vietnam War, and so I would say the biggest takeaway would be the same advice I would give us if we were teaching just all communities, is that, like, look at your student population and make deliberate choices to include them in your curriculum and center joy.
Right. I think the joy part is for Vietnam War, and this could be a whole separate conversation, is tough. I think, so many teachers, if they're going to show any video clips, will show these, will show like these traditionally embraced American movies about the Vietnam War, and they focus on the soldiers' experience and the darkness about it. And there is a place for that, but it's one perspective. And I think the longer you show a clip, even if it's an edited clip from Apocalypse Now or Platoon or any of these, it's like, it's at a certain point, I feel like it's doing more harm than good. It's like, how long in a class period or over multiple days are you going to spend on that perspective without matching it with, other perspectives? And that really is, unfortunately, I think too many teachers go to, or it's centering the whole conversation on the American soldier's experience and all of that stuff. And it's and I think depending on what part of the country you're on and things like that, it gets to be very tricky. And now, because of my experience, especially at this conference, I just have a different perspective. I just imagine being a kid in that class now and just being told, like, this is all you really need to know, and let's move on. And that's, I shared with you that, wanting to show them the Anthony Bourdain episode of Vietnam, and just other things where it's from their own perspective. They did some great reflections on it too, but that's I appreciate that. Anything other big tips we can give teachers who are teaching in these communities that they can really kind of settle on? Let me flip the question. Does the advice change if you're an educator in a school with a very small Asian community? Do the tips change, or do the things we should be doing for them change?
I don't think so. Because remember, at the root of it, it's meet your kids where they are, get to know your kids. Doesn't matter if it's 1 or 10 or your whole classroom. Obviously, if there are more, you may be a little bit more intentional in what you want to include to maybe really help that particular group of students see themselves or identify. But it doesn't matter if it's 1, 10, or your whole class. Inclusivity is inclusivity for all. And it doesn't matter what you teach, again, thinking about no matter what curriculum you teach, what grade level you teach, how are you making sure all of your students see themselves learn about themselves and their histories and their experiences, and celebrating the joy of that. Because I would argue that, for just using the example of Asian American studies, but this goes for any community, that if I'm working with a community that has very few or none, but I'm teaching them this is giving them the opportunity to understand and empathize with a community that is not theirs. And I think that's so powerful. And that's also something I didn't get as a kid, really getting to learn about other communities different from mine as well. I mean, we really only were taught one perspective growing up. And so I think it doesn't matter, how many of what type of community you're serving all of your students. And even if you don't have any Asian students at all, I think there is still power in including that, because there is still power in learning from experiences that are different from yours.
Virginia, did you have another piece of advice for us?
Yes, I definitely want to reinforce what Stacy said, that the advice that we're giving, it comes from combined. Stacy and I have over 30 years of teaching experience. So, I bring that up because we're committed to learning, and we are really trying to carve a path of what the experience of students is that is different from our own experience as teachers and students, that we ourselves were not taught this way. And even in like the teacher training programs and the professional developments that we're a part of and the conferences we attend, like this is not the approach that we have been given. We are building as we're going. We're imagining the classroom experience we want for our students and for ourselves as kids, and we're doing that. That's what's happening here. And what did we learn? We learned that all students need this. And then another thing, and this is like me, I'm Vietnamese American, so I can teach from the Vietnamese American point of view, but I'm not Chinese American. And I'm also not like African American, Black. I'm also not Latinx, so how do I bring all those perspectives in the classroom and honor it? I turn to those communities to learn. So if I'm thinking about advice for all educators, my main advice would be to open yourselves up to learn from that community directly. We are in a time period where we have access to so many wise, knowledgeable, open, open speakers like authors, scholars, just members of our community who are willing to teach us from their experiences. So as educators, if you want to know the best thing that you can do, I would actually say the very first step is to commit yourself to learning from the community that you want to bring into your classroom. And if you want to learn more, Stacy and I have curated resources that we ourselves have like vetted, we ourselves have learned from. And so, you can find out those resources as well. So you can join us in our journey to continue to learn.
Yeah. And on that note, I reached out to Dr. T4J Deng about oral histories because I was looking around for it and her name was all over the stuff. And she just wrote it was People's Guide to Orange County, and we're in Orange County, and I do want to say another great part about this conference was the people there were saying, if you need anything, reach out. And I've been to plenty of conferences where people say that, and then you reach out and they don't get back to you. She got back to me right away, gave me her schedule thing, and was like, I'd be happy to guide you in the right direction with this. And so the people you did select, and it sounds like, you say you're curating resources, you're also curating people who are very, very consistent, very aligned. And I just think that there's such an alignment with you two and what you're doing. That's why it's so powerful. The people are the real deal and they really do want to help. And that just added for me, because this just happened recently that I reached out to her. It just reinforced for me that what you guys are doing is super powerful, but it's authentic and it's helpful. And When you said you got to know your group, your students in front of you, it reminded me of an activity that I'm a mentor teacher with the District for New Teachers, or I was this year, and my rookie teacher had the assignment of, run some data on the students in front of you, and then make like a chart and paint a picture for, the induction team, paint a picture of your students. And so she was running all these reports and making these charts, and I said, you know what, that's really helpful. I'm going to do that for my classes. And I just felt better prepared because I had done all of this digging about how many of them, what's their home language, what is their cultural background, but even things like, parents at home, and just a variety of things. And then it inspired me to also do a little questionnaire, get to know you stuff early on, about their identities. And we used some of the facing history stuff, that identity cluster and things like that, which, I used to think, oh, that might be a good thing to do, but I really dug into it this year and just had some really amazing results. And I just want to encourage teachers listening, like, getting to know your students, painting a picture of them just helps you with planning and the cultural sensitivity and the readings you choose, and a lot of the content stuff. All right, last part here. You guys run or have founded Educate to Empower. What is next for Educate to Empower, and where can people get a hold of you, and what's on the horizon here?
What we do, I have Twitter, Instagram, Linktree, and website. I would say Linktree probably is like the best, like, quick stop to find resources, as well as, read more about our advocacy, get lessons, and a couple exciting things that we have teed up coming up soon. We are hosting a couple workshops through UCI Teacher Academy again, and what we love most about this, through the generous support and through a grant through Schools First, is that these are free. It's free for educators, and I just cannot express, like, as an educator, just how amazing that is. I can't even count the amount of things I've had to pay for out of pocket. So we're hosting some this summer, and it's part of our Building an Anti-Racist Classroom Community series. And this is really for educators that want to know strategies for starting off the year. We dig in with identity, community building, and we have books that we are raffling off as well. So if anyone's listening that's interested, that's offered this summer. We also have a couple other workshops that we are in the works of planning for the fall, also through UCI Teacher Academy. Again, free through Zoom. So we invite any and all who are interested to join. I'm also very excited to tease a little announcement that we haven't properly announced yet, but will soon. We received a grant in partnership with the OC Heritage Museum and UCI Teacher Academy, and with, like you mentioned, Dr. Tuivo Dang and her book, A People's History of Orange County. And this is to help create curriculum to align with that book to support Orange County educators. And so we're very, very excited. We're still in the works of planning this out, but this will hopefully serve Orange County educators with resources, lessons, and inspiration on exploring our local histories here in Orange County.
Awesome. That, like, just as an Orange County teacher, I'm already excited because, if we can act locally, put the national stuff aside, we can feel the impact so much quicker, and so much, the impact is so much more relevant. We're not going to do a whole lot anytime soon about some of these big national issues, but we can make our immediate surrounding better. And you two are doing, like, you're doing the stuff, right? Like, following through. And that, I think that's different. It might feel natural to you guys. You're a great team, but not everyone follows through. Not everyone says, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to actually do it. And it's inspiring. I'm grateful. Did you have any last parting words for anyone listening or anybody who's interested in any of the stuff we covered today? This is your chance here.
Well, I also don't want to forget to share that the Teaching for Justice conference at UCI, that was our inaugural one, and UCI is committed to making it an annual conference. So we are already in the planning process for the next conference. So that is part of our next action steps. Is we have the conference. Next year's conference is planning is in the works. And for those of you that are listening that went to the Teaching for Justice conference in April, we are inviting the participants to share space with us this summer. An announcement, an email is going to come out, and we're going to invite educators and other participants to share space with us and come, and we're going to have like a mini workshop on inclusive lesson planning, and then we're just going to sit together and like create lessons together. So the Teaching for Justice conference is one moment of a collection of opportunities and community that we are building. So that's another part of our announcements. Again, our goal is really to center building community and bringing people together.
I love that. It was a moment, and we're talking it up, and it was awesome, but it was step one. There's so much more to do. Just because you missed the moment doesn't mean you missed everything. There's much more to get. And I highly recommend anybody interested to reach out, and that it'll be in the show notes, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on a podcast. And you can also hit me up, and I will of course get you their contact stuff. So thank you very much. I know this was a lot of time, and I know you're both very busy, and it's a weekday, and everybody's very tired. And there's also been a lot of national events that have been really weighing on us. So adding all of that, I just want to say thank you before I let you go, and then just encourage everybody to check out what you guys are doing, and hopefully try to recreate some of that love and empathy and compassion, and especially joy in your classroom, because I think we could all use a little bit more of that. So I will see you guys soon. Thank you again. I appreciate you.